There are a few standard hallmarks that categorize just about every ARPG ever made. Legendary levels of loot, more enemies than a Jedi spawning in on a Death Star, and most importantly, momentum. Despite every mechanical, graphical, or visionary difference an ARPG might have, they all share this common goal: keep the player playing. And while the same could be said for just about every game out there in this day and age, I believe that notion rings all the more true in the ARPG genre, or what's left of it. An astute young grasshopper might ask, well, that's a good goal to have, isn't it? Yes and no. The difference between a good game and a bad one is not the goal itself, but how the game goes about reaching that goal. In ye old games of yore, that goal was rather different. The goal wasn't to keep the player playing necessarily, but to let the player have fun. Now I know these two goals might seem similar, but letting the player have fun and keeping the player playing are indeed two different goals. One can be met without the other. A player having fun will more than likely keep playing, but a player could be inclined to keep playing even if they aren't necessarily having fun.
All's well, I hope.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about popping off for the night.
We're done when I say we're done.
The way this new goal is reached is decided upon many factors, but the greatest of these is by far the amount of potential momentum players are allowed to have at any particular time in the game. How much can you earn? How much skill or power can you accrue at any one time? What can you eventually become? And while this may seem like a popular comparison to highlight, I've found there is no greater contrast in this fundamental gaming philosophy within the ARPG genre than in Path of Exile and Diablo 4. They are almost polar opposites when it comes to how they approach momentum.
I feel like I'm dying inside. I feel like Neve Campbell in Scream 2. She thinks she can go off to college and be happy, and then the murderer comes back, starts killing off all of her friends. Learned a lot of lessons from that movie. This is just one of them.
Let's have a look at D4 for starters. In Diablo 4, if you've already completed the story, you can just skip it, heading fresh into the season. You can create your character, walk into Sanctuary, teleport to wherever, and just start killing mobs. Believe it or not, you are probably the most powerful you will ever be at level 1. You may clear faster after acquiring build-enabling items or skills later on in the game, and as you progress through the game, those numbers keep going up, so why don't they feel like they're going up? D4's answer to the question, how do we keep players playing, is this: front load momentum to get players attached, then drip feed small spikes in power and prestige to make the player feel like they are progressing. Diablo 4's approach to momentum is to give it to players straight away and then have them chase the dragon, so to speak. But why does Diablo do this if it hurts the players that play the most? Because it wasn't made for players who play. It was made for players who don't. Players in Diablo 4 are set on an eternal chase for the momentum that they felt at the start of the game. Every level up, every monster defeated simply is another obstacle pushing you farther and farther away from that initial momentum. Whether you make it to level 100 is of no consequence to Diablo 4 as long as you keep playing. Stifle momentum, the player plays longer. Not because they enjoy it, but because they want to enjoy it. Now let's compare that to Path of Exile.
It's so fast! It's so quick, it can destroy your entire face.
When starting a fresh seasonal character, you do not have the option to skip anything. You can't go where you want, and you have to play through the entire story. And if you want that sweet, sweet clear speed the game is known for, you have to have a decent build, which means farming, research, testing, and playing the game. So why is Path of Exile objectively hailed as the better game if you have to do all this work to have fun? If you've been paying attention and haven't just been watching this in the background of your second monitor, you already know the answer: momentum. Path of Exile's approach to momentum is fundamentally different to Diablo 4's because instead of losing momentum, you build it. As you speedrun through the story for the 654th time, you will start by feeling slow. Enemies hit hard and you can only damage one of them at a time while they seemingly overwhelm you. As you continue to kite and fight, however, you go stronger. You start doing more damage and can take on more foes. If your build is good, or you just copied a good build because you feel like it's way too much work to figure one out by yourself and try to end up feeling miserably and you don't ever want to have to waste so much time ever again, This momentum culminates in the endgame as you crash through hordes of enemies at the speed of light, obliterating everything in sight, living or otherwise, while swimming through so much loot you have to literally filter it out, or you'll be standing still for so long sifting through gear you'll be kicked for idling. This philosophy isn't only applicable to ARPGs, but can be seen in many other games outside the genre. Let's take Baldur's Gate 3 for example. Although you start as an injured and shipwrecked proverbial tadpole taking its first baby steps into a cold, unforgiving Baldurian world, it doesn't take long before you start slaying foes left and right with seldom ground to walk on between breathtaking and intriguing events that help paint the bigger picture of the engaging overarching storyline. The idea of momentum is ageless if you really think about it, seemingly small events leading to much bigger outcomes. When you create a new character for the first time, when you start a new game, it's enjoyable to fantasize what we imagine those characters becoming. In Skyrim, you start off as a prisoner afforded spectacular circumstances, a second chance at life, and what is done with that life is completely up to the player's discretion. Regardless of what those choices are, there is momentum gained with every action. Every spell cast, every swing of the sword, every pickpocket all lead you away from that frail, weak prisoner that you once were to the near godlike character you inevitably become. Hopefully now you can see the picture. This fundamental approach and philosophy is what makes or breaks great games and the hobby as a whole. The successful examples I've highlighted and the many more I didn't all share a fundamental philosophy I think any ARPG or any game in general can take home and apply with great results.